You might know that I do mindset coaching with climbers, and I've been having some amazing success with my clients. It's so fun to watch people go from really disliking climbing and having such frustrating days to loving it again and feeling confident and having success with fear of falling, fear of failure, and challenging themselves again in a really healthy way. So I love coaching so much that I just opened up more space in my calendar, and I'm currently taking 5 more mindset coaching clients. And I decreased my prices to make mindset coaching more approachable for people because I know this is kind of a new concept. So I offer single hour-long sessions, or you can now purchase a package of 4 sessions with me at a discounted rate. It's $21 off per session. So optimally, we'd use those 4 sessions over a 2-month time frame. So we'd see each other every other week, but it doesn't have to be like that. So what would you use those mindset coaching sessions for? Climbing better and with more focus, overcoming your fear of falling, dealing with comparison with others, finding the confidence to try hard in front of others or just to try hard in general, performing with a positive mindset even on hard projects, and reigniting the joy and passion you used to have for climbing. So these are the things I often work with climbers on, but I also help people with their everyday lives, talking about their relationships with their partners, job satisfaction, making tough life decisions, and lots more. If you're not quite ready to sign up with me, you can do a 15-minute free session to see if we're a good fit. And my pricing is now at $120 for a single session or $396 for a package of 4 sessions. You can find all of that at trainingbeta.com/mindset. And I hope to work with you soon. This is the Training Beta podcast, and I'm your host, Neely Quinn. Thanks for joining me for another episode all about climbing training, and this one is properly about climbing training. I have a climbing coach, personal trainer on the show named Collin McGee, and he works at C4HP, Camp for Human Performance, with Tyler Nelson, but he also works out of a clinic with people in person. And he works with people of all ages, abilities, different sports. And so he has like a really good general understanding of how to train an athlete and how to make people stronger. And as a climber, he also understands climbing really thoroughly. So I had him on the show to talk about how to organize your training and climbing into a busy week using basically like the minimum effective dose of training. Because a lot of people are busy, we don't have maybe the time we even used to have to climb and train. So he's going to go through pretty systematically talking about assessments, like how he assesses an athlete and how you can extrapolate that for yourself. And then how to strength train, how to train power, how to train endurance and flexibility, and then how to put a plan together for yourself. So I won't belabor this any longer. I'm just going to let you hear it from himself, Collin McGee. And on Instagram, he's Lifts McGee. You might have seen his stuff. And again, you can find him at Camp for Human Performance, where he works alongside Tyler Nelson, and he'll tell you about that too. All right, enjoy, and I'll talk to you on the other side. All right, welcome to the show, Collin. Thanks so much for talking to me today.
No, thank you so much for having me. Like we briefly discussed before, it's been a long time coming. You know, I started listening to your podcast like 2019 or so when I was first starting to know Tyler, and I was trying to do more research on him. And so your podcast popped up right away. And so fast forward till now, whatever year it is, and now I'm on. So I really, really appreciate it. I'm very honored to be asked on the podcast. It's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And like anybody who Tyler trusts, I trust because like in terms of climbing training, and I'm curious about your relationship with him. Like you said that you kind of started researching him partly using my podcast to see who this guy was who was popping up everywhere. And so then what happened with you all?
Yeah. So, long story short, I was a baseball player for my longest time. Ever since I was 4 years old, played in high school, and I was fortunate enough for my athletic ability to have it sneak me into an Ivy League school. So I went to Cornell University, played baseball there, and then my baseball career kind of ended after college, and I was really lost. I consider myself like a lost puppy. I was like, oh man, that whole chapter of my life was gone. And my friends who I ended up hiring to be another coach with me. So I'm a personal trainer by trade as my day job. They were very into like ninja training and Ninja Warrior and the warp walls and the laches and all that really fun stuff. And they used rock climbing for training because rock climbers, go figure, were really good at that sport.
Mm.
And so they took me to a local gym and I just fell in love. I remember like top roping and like dynoing to my first thing. I kicked the wall and I had this golf ball sized bruise on me for weeks, and I didn't look back. And it was that really cool moment where I was like, wow, I kind of forgot about baseball for a while. And so it was this nice thing to almost have this shift of identity and the whole like psychology behind that. Um, and so because I was in fitness and climbing, Instagram algorithms are really good at that. And so boom, pops up this person, Tyler Nelson, who's tattooed, jacked, was fitness and climbing and doing this really cool exercise science stuff. And I was like, I like this. I want to follow this guy. Boom, your podcast starts to pop up, the websites, the articles, and he had a course in Philadelphia because I live in Pennsylvania that was really close. And I was one of two coaches there. And then to shorten the story, I just kind of stuck with it. He asked me to be like a remote testing coach for a little bit. And then slowly but surely, I was asked to do more and then to do more. And now, before you know it, we were in Germany together last weekend teaching 24 coaches and having a great time. So
That's
it's
awesome.
a pretty fun story to go from baseball professional dreams to coaching rock climbing across the world. So
Yeah, that's cool. And do you do only remote coaching or are you also seeing people in person?
I see 95% of what I do is in person. My main job is dealing with your quality of life person. So you're 40 to, I think my oldest is like 88-year-old client that just wants to move better and feel better. And maybe they have a knee replacement that they need to manage, or they have grandkids that they want to stay healthy for. I also teach or coach performative things where I work with soccer players, football, lacrosse, field hockey, you name it, all field sports in the training aspect to help them build strength, range of motion, power, and performance. And then I also do the in person rock climbing stuff too, where I coach beginners from the youth to adults on how to engage with the wall, learning basic techniques, and then the beginner to professional level climber when it comes to their strength, their health, assessing their fingers, showing them which direction is going to be the best use of their time. And I do all of that in person.
That's crazy. I only say that's crazy because I've actually never had another coach on the show who also coaches like general population and other sports. So you're very well rounded.
Yeah, and I think that's has been a helpful superpower in a sense. And honestly, like Tyler, I don't know if he's ever mentioned, he was a college baseball player too. So we kind of stars united right there. And coming from a different sport, and this isn't excuse me, for only baseball, but a lot of other sports. There's a quote from a good strength coach that was a mentor of mine. It says, some of the best coaches are the ones that never did the sport. And that's not to like fluff our feathers or anything, but it allows you to kind of see things a little bit more objectively. I was a baseball player, and the number one athlete that I train in person right now is field hockey. I know nothing about field hockey. No rule except they blow the whistle way too many times, and it's a really annoying sport to watch sometimes. Not as dry as baseball, but it allows you to just do those things. And what I was capable of doing is just easily identifying, wow, this girl is working too much. She's playing too much. We need to reduce the number of games she's playing, quit the 3 or 4 other club sports, bring it back, get them strong and healthy. And then bada bing, bada boom, they were injured less. They were playing better. And I was like, oh, this is actually kind of easy. I can be the quote unquote field hockey guy. And so it kind of led to the new passion of me climbing. And it was easier to see what we teach now in the simplicity of strength training. I didn't get sucked into traditional lifting ways like I did in baseball, like the crazy baseball arm care and this and that. There's a lot of fluff that goes in. that if you just come into the sport, it can be overwhelming. And so I was like, oh yeah, it totally makes sense that climbers should strength train and climbers should do this simply and whatnot. And then you go into a sport a little bit and you hear like, you guys do what for how long? How many random things? That doesn't make sense. And it was a nice filter to come from another sports, and it's keeping me honest with my education and my teachings, knowing that I have to bounce from climber to field hockey to climber to grandfather to climber to swimmer, and I have to be good at all those things. And the overarching answer is that the middle ground is usually where all those sports cross over. A little bit of strength, staying healthy, and then that ability to just do their sport or their life more frequently.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, is what you're saying that you think that people get stuck in the weeds with climbing training? Like you think people are doing too many specific things for it?
Yeah, I think I was having a conversation with another really smart physiologist that works with some of the tech that we use. And he's like, you get to a point where all of training is just getting a good educated guess. You do a little bit of something, see if it works. If it does, great, keep doing that thing. If not, you tweak it a little bit rather than chasing like this week I want to do 4x4s, and next phase I'm going to switch over to minimal edge training, and next phase I'm going to do the other name thing. And it's not necessarily the name of the thing that matters, it is the underlying principles or the fundamentals that make all of those named things work. And it's not to say things don't work when you go specific or brand name, but the if you can really find out the fundamentals of strength, which is something near your max, or power, which is something when you're moving fast, and you just focus on those little things, all of the confusion and it feels like drinking water from a fire hose kind of goes away because oh, if I want to get strong, it just has to be heavy. Oh, if I want to go fast, that's how I get my power. Oh, if I want to increase my endurance, I just do a little bit more. And then next week, I do a little bit more. And then you just rinse, wash, and repeat. And initially, we need those exercise names to follow until it clicks. And then you never need, quote unquote, a 4x4 again, because then you just create your own that works.
Got it. So you don't want to get too caught up in the details and yeah.
Yeah, it can be really confusing, and it takes a little bit more time to learn, the fundamentals. But once you do, you have all the answers for life, which is nice.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. We had brainstormed some topics and we came up with basically like how to organize your training and climbing into a busy week using the minimum effective dose of training, which I think a lot of people can appreciate because most people have jobs and they have other responsibilities. They want to be able to climb and train, but they want to get the most bang for their buck basically in their sessions. And so I'm glad we're talking about this, and I'm glad I'm talking to you about this because you probably have a lot of experience with this on like from all of these different sports.
Right, and sometimes the hardest people to work with are the ones with the most time on their hands
Mm.
because you can kind of get lost in like, oh man, I'm home already, but it's only been 2 hours at the gym. Should I go back? Should I maximize this time? Am I sitting on the couch and getting bad?
Yeah.
But once you have a job or you're trying to do multiple careers or passions or you have a family, you're like, wow, I thought I had a lot of time before and now I don't, and you only have 30 minutes here and there or an hour here and there. And so what you do has to work well. And it's easier to almost get people to buy into this stuff because they need something that is effective. They don't have time to spend 4 hours doing something that kind of works. You need that
Mhm.
shorter and effective thing. And for the athletes that I deal with, it's school and relationships and family and trying to be a kid as well as playing sports. And then for the adults, it's the family, the kids, all these other careers. And so, yeah, being in that environment with all these people has helped me trim all of what I do and only give the most minimal thing. And if they do it and they get better and they can afford more, great. We'll add a little bit in there. But to give someone a plan, as soon as they look at it and go, oh my, there's no way. That person is more likely to do nothing than the little bit from that plan that would have got them progress.
Yeah. It's funny, that's me.
Am I
I'm
speaking
like
directly to
the
you now?
Yeah, I'm like the least coachable person I've found out, which is really ironic. But yeah, it can be really overwhelming, and especially if a lot of some of the things that a coach is giving you to do are new, and you
Mhm.
have to sit there and watch YouTube videos about how to do them, and then you have questions and you're unsure, and then you don't even want to begin. So, yeah, now, you made an outline for this interview, which I really appreciate. Um, and I'd love to just like jump into where people can start and the process that you go through with your clients. But is there anything that you want to say before we get into that?
No, just that this outline is basically my coaching process, whether it's in person or remote, or how I teach coaches how to think. And I just think it's a simple formula that allows you to truly know who you're working with, truly know how to get them from point A to point B. But also, it emphasizes the point of like coaching is about like being there for someone. It's about hearing them. It's about understanding why they think the way they do and overcoming those misconceptions and those fears and these positions they're in, and allows them to better accept that they can do a little less. And it takes some time, but as soon as you get someone to have like that aha moment or that liberating feel where they're doing a little less, they're seeing results, but also feeling better and having time for life, it should be a win. They're like, oh, wow. Like you get unshackled from this 25 hours of training a week or bust kind of thing. And you get
Yeah.
to like enjoy life and enjoy climbing again.
Yeah. And I'll ask, I mean, what kinds of results do you see with your clients who are climbers?
The biggest ones, it's wow. I have done less than I thought I ever did. 50 to percent. People cut things in half. And like I'm still strong, or I'm getting stronger, and I'm feeling better on the wall. I didn't get that finger tweak this month, and it's just those little things. I don't guarantee anyone tin deck or force board number results. I don't guarantee anyone sending or clipping the change or topping out the boulders. There's so many factors that go into a performance based outcome. But what I try and guarantee is that organizing your life that's going to fit the training that you're actually going to do, eventually you're going to feel a little better. You're going to start to see results. And realistically, you're going to get to your result faster than always bouncing from different programs, trying to fit it all in, chase all the rabbits, come home hungry. And so even though the faster is a couple of months, it's still 6 months to your result is a lot faster than 3 or 5 years of frustration and confusion.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, should we jump in?
Sure. I like to always start by having some kind of assessment. And in the assessment world, it can get really nitty gritty. We can do finger strength and RFD and contact strength. But one of my favorite assessments is just talking to someone, is understanding who they are, what's their story, what makes them tick, why are you afraid of making moves above the clip? Did you take a fall? Do you have a fall off a horse one time? And you're like, I never want to hit the ground again. And so, really understanding these people from the inside out is going to help you speak to them, find the language that makes everything click. And it's ultimately that trust building thing. One of the phrases I start off like every course telling people, if I don't butcher it, is people do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. And you have to be able to understand where people are coming from. And you just can't bark orders at them like, do the training program, focus on it, squat lower, right? All these verbal things don't mean anything unless the person understands why and knows that these words that are coming at them are meant for their better health and their benefit. Because the majority of people that I coach or that I coach coaches on how to coach, they don't know what tenosynovitis words mean. They don't know big ATP and energy systems. They just want to know, am I going in the right direction? And so if I can't understand your language, but I know you care about me, I'm more likely to trust you. And then on top of that, if you're a good coach and actually know what you're talking about, you're going to help your clients move a lot quicker. So step one is talk to your person. And if your conversation lasts 5 or 10 minutes, I think it could be more. Like you're ask them deeper questions, more meaningful questions. When they say, "Hey, I want to get stronger," ask them why. And then ask them why again. And then ask them why one more time. And you might realize it was because of a friend that they're climbing with and they always campus boulders and they're strong. When really maybe they actually have the strength and they don't need to spend time strength training their fingers. They can actually just hop on climbs with more intention and take up skills practice. And so you can help people just drive in the right direction because there's nothing really wrong about going hard or going fast. You know, speeding, it's more or less like speeding in the wrong direction that gets people frustrated. So, first, talk to them. And then on top of that, I like to then see the more objective things. So, I take people through range of motion assessments because I want to see and I want to know that you can do things safely and effectively before I find out the hard way. So if I just say, "Oh, you're a human, here's a squat," and you have a hip issue, or you have a tight this, or you have a medical issue that doesn't allow you to do something, and I get it wrong, that's on me. Like I should have known that you can do things and you can't do things. Maybe you do have some wear and tear in the body, and we have a shoulder replacement or a rotator cuff, blah, blah, blah. And at one point in time, you could reach your hand all the way over your head and you can do some really crazy moves, but now you can't. I need to know that before I just give you overhead press, right? Because maybe we have to move more horizontally until we can work on some range of motion. So you have to gather the physical information. Having how they move from a joint body perspective gives you insight into why they move the way they do on the wall. So sometimes someone complains about a high step or a drop knee. If you don't know them from a joint level and they have trouble drop kneeing, but maybe after a physical assessment, you come to the conclusion, man, their hip anatomy is just never going to allow that. They were born a certain way. We're like, well, okay. The realistic answer is maybe Adam Andra level drop knee is just never in your cards. That's okay because climbing is really cool in which we can find a new solution to this problem. But if you don't know that, you might just force them into drop knee drills and they're going to stay frustrated because they physically can't do it. Words will never make a joint move better. Understanding how they move and their limitations and whether or not it is trainable will. And then the physical things are important too. So maybe how strong they are. You can do little things like a pull-up test or a push-up test or anything. And then if you have the fancy tech and tools like the Tindeck and the force board and any other force gauges or assessment devices, great. That's all cherries on top, knowing exactly where someone starts. But if you don't have a good point A defined, I think it makes really hard defining the path they need to take to point B.
Got it. Yes. And so, like, for people who are listening to this and they don't have the resources to get a coach or see anybody to assess them, what would you say to them?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I do have like personally like a free video assessment thingy that kind of explains things why. But I think if you don't have that, you don't want to hire or look for any information. It's kind of trusting your body and saying like this drop knee feels really painful or this range of motion really hurts. Maybe there's another way around it or maybe there's another solution. And maybe it's fundamentally kind of pigeonholing people's selves into, oh, I need to stretch to make this work, or I need to get stronger to send this grade. Um, and it's the acceptance of trying to find alternative solutions to that that will help people navigate. Because if you just keep banging your head through the wall and the door was one step to the right, you kind of want to take that one step to the right or know that that's okay to find a way to around the problem.
Yeah, it seems like people who do have limitations like that, it would be a good idea to have a coach to help them or somebody to help guide them.
Yeah, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there, and even maybe like the range of motion stuff. One of the things I see more common than not is people come in and go, "I am so inflexible," or "I am so tight," and then I will either physically take them through a range of motion test in person, or I have them do like a video one that they submit to me. And man, they can spin their leg around, and when their hamstrings, they can knee themselves in the face. And they will still be like, see, I'm so inflexible. And partly the issue is misconceptions around what flexibility is or what tightness is, and just generalized misconceptions. And maybe they come from a quote unquote bad example. So maybe you look at Alex Magos and his fantastic ability to just go through any range of motion he wants to. And like that is the standard. But that's hard because he's so good and he's worked so long for that. And maybe there's some genetic components into that, that it's not the standard for like you or I, who come from different backgrounds and have different genetic abilities and are fundamentally just different. Like the fact that I am not Alex means that my path has to be a little different. And that can be hard, but that takes an educational process. And so if you feel quote unquote tight, or you know or have been told that you're inflexible, sometimes it's worth taking a second opinion and getting to someone that can educate on, no, I don't think your range of motion is actually limited. Like you were on your back and I was able to just throw your foot into your mouth. That's a lot of range of motion. But if you feel tight, this is what it may mean. And in that specific example, sometimes tightness is just fatigue, or it's just an inability for the muscle and the mind to be aware. And so like if you run a marathon, your calves are probably going to feel tight, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have good range of motion. The muscles are just over it and they're ready for a nap. And so it's better understanding these people's stories, knowing what they're doing for training, what they have been doing. So then when they come into you and you see these things, but they still use those words, you know exactly how to communicate more or less the true reason behind things.
Got it. Okay. So that's the assessment part, unless there's something else you want to add to that.
Um, just like that, the physical qualities and the um, strength training things can be really good because it can tell you when people may be getting close to like strong enough. We don't really have a lot of data that exactly says what Tyler's getting really close, and I think he's going to start doing his PhD on things like this. But more often than not, more is not better. Better is better. And so we have to hit a point where like, do I really need to push to a 600-pound deadlift, or is 400 enough? Can I start to change and work on different qualities, maybe single leg, or maybe fast, or maybe range of motion. And so more of that physical objective information can be really helpful for helping people make decisions, especially after you start working with someone and after 2 months you reassess them like, wow, things worked, or great, we got to a point where I'm pretty happy. Let's switch gears and start to work on this lane. And then ultimately all of that has to be able to like fit into their schedule. So part back to the talking to people is before you write them a climbing program, know, hey, I'm a mom of 4 kids and I have to drop them off at soccer, and then we go to lacrosse, and then we go to climbing practice. I have 30 minutes in the morning before I go twice a week. Can you help me? Because all of that information you talked about and the climbing and the strength, it has to fit into that, because if it doesn't, they're not going to be able to do it, and then you can't help them. So the final really important thing is after you talk to them about their story, you find out the information you want. Now what does the puzzle look like for those pieces to fit in?
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yes. So then once you've figured out their background information, or the person themselves has really taken an objective look at their everything, then what?
It's kind of finding where they should start. A lot of people are just confused at where to start. And so, for example, I might have someone that really wants to be a great boulder and increase their bouldering grade. And maybe that climbing style that they're engaging is overhung and really powerful. But upon conversation with this person, we find out that they have no background in any kind of strength. And maybe they've been climbing a lot. Then I physically assess them, and their strength numbers are pretty low relative to what's going on. Instead of immediately hearing their words and be like, oh, they want to boulder, they want to be powerful. Well, the climbing analogy to power is campus board. Let's go campus board. That might not be the right tool for them just yet. They should build a foundation of strength training before they get into more complicated things, or things that basically need that foundation of strength to even be able to move fast. And more importantly, even be able to handle the demands of more complicated training like bouldering or power training. If you're not strong and your tissues aren't resilient, that stuff is going to take a bigger toll on you. So you might need 2 or 3 days of recovery before you can get back in the gym and start working. Next to the person who's fundamentally really strong, they might need only like 24 hours or a little more. And the person that is in the gym more frequently throughout the year doing quality sessions when they're recovered becomes the better climber. It's not just forcing yourself into there. So it's more, it's that long game that people have to learn to appreciate rather than that really quick instant gratification of, ooh, I'm campus sporting, I'm getting my power. Where first, maybe the first 2 months, you should be strength training to handle that better. And then the stronger person should have the ability to move even faster and get more effectiveness out of training like that.
And
So
what would that look like?
the strength training or like the power?
Let's start with the strength training.
Sure. I think you have to kind of like eat your meat and potatoes before you get the fancy dessert. So things like pushing and pulling and legs. I kind of like to say like push, pull, legs, fingers in a sense. And that way you're just nose to toes, just being comprehensively a strong human. So you might squat or you might deadlift, you might do lunges, you might do push ups, bench press, pull ups, and all the machine variations of that. And then with the fingers, you might engage on like larger edges. So maybe at least 20 millimeter plus, something that if the listener is looking at their very tip of their finger is kind of like covering the entirety of that joint. It makes it easy to work hard and it makes the strength training more effective for strength, high effort stuff because you just need that fundamental resilience. The fingers need it to handle really small holds and fast movements, and then the body needs to handle it for everything from strong Gastoni moves and campus moves to just the approach to get to your project and all of that. And so fundamentally, people should check off the box of strength training that ideally doesn't really look a lot like climbing. There are every other sport, I'll say, starts off with training that doesn't look like basketball, that doesn't look like soccer. They're not going around kicking dumbbells. They're in there squatting and pushing and pulling and doing bicep curls and doing calf raises because they fundamentally want to build a body that can handle 3 hours of soccer practice. But they also fundamentally want to build a body that can then transition into sprinting and single leg jumps and things that are going to start to make the rubber hit the road when it comes with their training. And it's kind of like building that ramp or that bridge into higher quality soccer play or higher quality tennis play or higher quality climbing time on the wall. So it doesn't have to be very complicated. The 90% of who I work with, from weekend warrior to I have a 14C project, 4 to 6 exercises, 2 to 3 times per week. It might be goblet squat or squat, dumbbell row, maybe a core exercise for fun, and then we go into a single leg exercise, maybe a shoulder press and some calf raises. It will complement on the other day, and the goal there is can you do about 6 to 8 reps and challenging. So that 6 to 8 rep realm just exists from the middle ground of 12 and plus, it might be a little light, 3 to 5 reps and it might be a little heavy. So somewhere in the middle is that Goldilocks zone where if they can get to that 8th rep and they're like, ugh, maybe I can do 9 or 10, but definitely not 11. That challenge is nice. It's not too heavy. It's not too light. And it's going to give them that strength they're looking for. And that is what they're doing 2 to 3 times per week for the rest of their lives because they just fundamentally, you're like, whoa, for life, I have to take care of my body, right? And that's a lot of, that resiliency and that strength is what's going on. Then they built that foundation. You can sprinkle in the fun stuff like the finger training and the campusing and the power climbing and the endurance work. But it's that, hey, like you're a human first, then you're a rock climber. I have to make you human strong first before I can really effectively and safely make you climbing strong.
Yes. Got it. And one question on that, and I know that this is getting in the details,
Sure.
but a lot of people are doing like 5 reps for strength training, but you're saying 6 to 8. Is there any difference there?
Not really. I would, as a coach, give someone the 3 to 5 rep thing if I know they've had a lot of time doing it and they're becoming that advanced level experienced person, which we tend to define as like someone who's been consistently training for about a year. Like their body's like, all right, good enough. I just can't look at the dumbbell and get strong. You need to challenge me. And so you can play around with like lower reps. Like a typical one's like a 5 by 5, right? It's heavy. And what it does is it better guarantees that it's giving you strength as long as you're still getting that relative intensity down. So for the 5 by 5 person, that fifth rep should be on the harder side. Like if you're using a weight that you can do 5 by 15 with, it's not going to work. So just because you write 5 by 5 on a piece of paper doesn't mean you're getting stronger. But for the beginners and the intermediates, that 8 rep thing is just a nice middle ground, but I will certainly drop it down to like the 5 or 6 round for sure.
Got it. Okay. Cool. And then power.
Power training. So power training is the sexy version of training that everyone kind of wants to get involved in. Or it could be the very intimidating thing when people are slabby or technical climbers and they're like, man, it's a really big move. I would never do that. Or that's an overhung roof. I would never do that. And so that same person, and let's assume that they bought in, they're like, yeah, Collin, I love to get strong, and now I'm strong, I'm happy. What strength training will do will set the foundation, give you the resiliency to do high cost training like power, but it'll also allow the body to actually move in ways in which the power training is more easily to gain. And so for the majority of the people, when you do power training, it should be fast. It should look like you're sprinting or you're moving dynamically because you're trying to teach the brain how to be a light switch. You don't always want to be a dimmer switch, which strength training can be. You want to move quickly. And so eventually, heavy and slow strength training is just going to be kind of good enough for strength, but it's not going to make you move faster. It's not going to be able to make you make that big move. And it's not going to make you latch onto the hold effectively really quickly. You have to put the pedal to the metal a little bit with your training. And so now we shift into those things. But the reason why we also do strength training to proceed is just to be able to handle that. So if you can imagine someone who's brand new to fitness in general, or even like a little kid, and you ask them to jump and land, they might be like a little wobbly. And so not only is it wanting their joints and their muscles to be able to handle it and their muscles be able to move, but it's that learning process of being able to control your body that creates a safe environment for power training to happen. Even when you're maybe trying to learn a very powerful crux, you start off slow, you hold the positions, then you kind of increase the speed. So the same thing goes with our training process of the first box to check, let's get strong, let's learn how our body moves, let's create control. Then, all right, let's shift it into fifth and sixth gear. Let's teach your body how to move fast. And I bring up the cost analogy because I think I stole this from another friend who brought up like body dollars. So everything costs something. Some things just cost more than others. Power training, like snatching a hold really fast, costs a little bit more than just keeping my feet on the ground, putting my hand on the fingerboard, and then slowly squeezing it or slowly sagging into it. The speed of the movement asks the tendons and the muscles to work a little differently. Not in a bad way, but a little bit more aggressive, and that's okay. Similar to like endurance training. That is very costly. It takes a lot out of your body to do endurance training, and which is why it can't exist 4 days a week indefinitely for the rest of your life. It's just too fatiguing. We need to have it come in and out. And so it's just managing what you do, understanding the relative cost of that, because we all know what happens when we spend too much money in our bank account. We get fees or check engine lights, right? And we don't want to hit that overdraft thing.
Right. Got it. Okay, move things fast for power. And then do you want to talk about endurance?
Sure. And then the endurance. So the endurance thing is, I guess, like the holy grail of climbing. If we can like truly have an answer to that, we unfortunately have like less podcasts and less blogs and things to do. For now, my thoughts on endurance are that of almost like a runner, where if I strength train and I can move really fast, But then I try and go run a mile. Things are going to feel a little different, especially if I've never even run a mile. So we need to teach our body how to take those thousands of sub maximal, like easy effort reps. And I think the best way to look at it, if I had the blanket statement, is pick this climbing style and the edges and the hold types that you want to get good at for the duration that you want to get good at them. So maybe I am a 30-degree, 30 millimeter edge climber, and I have to climb 50 meters or 150 feet. Eventually, I want to get that good. So I might start off at 50 feet of climbing and slowly work up to 60 and 70 and so forth, and give my body enough time to actually build the changes in my body to handle that. Now, to slightly get gritty, I think there is tons of value for off-wall endurance training because according to the fingers, we've talked about this with Tyler on the podcast a lot, the difference in the isometrics.
Yeah.
In on the wall, it's also really hard to separate skill. So just because you clip the chains, you might not have an ounce of physical gain. No more strength, no more endurance, no more power. You just got better, right? And so that's where climbing can be really hard to better guarantee that these physical things are happening. But in climbing, there's always a mix of grips. There's always a mix of these contraction types, overcoming and yielding and all these things. And it's hard to control. What is awesome about off-wall training is you can control it all. You don't have a little foot that you might slip off of. You don't have fatigue that's making you tired and switch contraction types. You can better guarantee and set the environment for what you want to get. And I always say, whether it's finger work or squatting, the best thing about the weight room or the fitness center is you can do things that you can't guarantee well on the wall. You can just do those awful things, and that's what you want to focus on. Because when you're on the wall, you can organize a climbing session to be a little bit specific, but you can't control it all. But you are in complete control off the wall. So if you want to do the squeezy, overcoming isometric and focus more on your muscle, you can. If you want to hang on a hangboard, induce a little bit more of the stretch and the tolerance stuff, you can, because you can set the rules. On the climbing wall, it's just hard to do. But you do need to climb, just like a runner needs to run. And a cyclist needs to cycle, because you can only really get those tolerance abilities on the wall if you slowly progress how much you're doing at what intensity and so forth.
Okay. Do you want to give any more details on that, or do you feel like people should be able to go off and running with that?
I'm sure there's a lot of probably a lot more detail that would give more clarity. But I'd say, if I was someone who wanted to increase my endurance on the wall, I would give myself way more time than I wanted to. So if you have a trip coming up in a month, it's too late to start your endurance training. I think endurance needs to be like a year-long thing, in a sense of there should be periods of focus. And then if I'm a sport climber, even like a hybrid climber, like I boulder and I sport climb, a little bit throughout the year, like once a week, you should get on ropes and keep the longer duration hand moves thing alive. It's good for your body, your mind, and your physical tolerance, and all the energy system stuff's in there. But then at times you want to ramp it up and be strategic about it. And the simplest way to think about it is, again, I might go on the spray wall, pick out the holds I want, climb at the pace that makes sense to me, and then I might go for 20 moves and then rest, and then 20 moves and then rest. And then eventually it's going to go to like 17 and then maybe like 12. You're going to have a big drop off. At that point, you should be done. You don't go back onto the slab wall, don't go campus, and don't do any more finger training. Be done and rest and allow yourself to recover for next 2 days. You come back and repeat that thing. And then over the course of maybe 6 weeks, those sessions where you're counting your hand moves and your duration should go up a little bit. And if week 2, week 3, week 6, now you're doing 35 hand moves, well, hey, you're getting better, especially if you're feeling better in the fingers and the forearms. It doesn't take you as long to recover. That's awesome. But again, I said that, when you're climbing on the wall, there's always skill, and it is an impossible thing to completely separate. So maybe you did get a little better at climbing, and that's okay. When you're on the wall, you have to accept that there's always going to be a skill component. Now, off the wall, I would, if I could, use something like Tindeck, force board, a scale, because now you have some type of measurability where I can say, hey, we are definitely objectively giving you better muscular endurance, let's say. And so, for example, last month I had the force board and I did a max test and I took 60% of that and I just did a 7 seconds on, 1 second off repeat until I could not hit that 60% number anymore. That was my definition of fatigue. And I chose 60 because it's in the middle. I could have done 50, I could have done 70 maybe, but I definitely didn't do 80 or 90 and I was, over 40 and 50. I got 10 reps. I continued to move through training and then 2 months later I came back and I did the exact same test. So let's say back then it was 60 pounds was 60%. I chose 60 pounds again. And I went from, I think, like 15 reps to 21 reps. So my endurance, that is not skill based, I wasn't climbing, I didn't have any small feet or heel hooks to do, improved. Now, I could easily get back on a wall and fall at the chains or still struggle at the crux because climbing is so much more than just improving it. But it's kind of like taking your car to the garage. They say, hey, you've got new shiny tires. Awesome. You still might crash because you're a bad climber or a driver. So you need to have both ends, I think, organized. Do I have off wall things that are showing me, hey, Collin, you're getting stronger? You're getting improvement in endurance. Awesome. And do I have an on wall organization and game plan that allows me to get better at climbing, but also do so in ways that don't overdo it?
All right. Yeah, that was pretty thorough. And I think the next thing that you wanted to talk about was flexibility.
Yeah, it's one of those touching points because, like endurance, I think flexibility is really sexy for the climbing world. And it's definitely important because I think in a meta version of things, the more range of motion one has, theoretically, they should have more options of movement on the wall. If you imagine the extremes of someone who's like double shoulder replacement, replaced hips, fused spine, they're not going to have too many options climbing up a wall. But you take someone who has a gymnastics background and a dance background, even like a martial arts background, and you get them into climbing, they are fantastic. They don't know how to use their fingers, but they have so much flow and mobility and thought process and options to put their toe way over there. And so it definitely helps. However, the caveat is the blanket statementing that everyone needs to work on their flexibility and stretch in X ways. And all quote unquote tightness that you feel is a need to stretch. I think I've just seen personally so many people that come in and they say they are inflexible, they say they are tight, and they're hypermobile. And those people have hypermobility to the point that their joints are now like unstable and they objectively don't need to stretch and shouldn't hold end range things for now. They need to bring it back into the mid range. They need to strengthen it. They need to bring stability and body awareness to it, and then slowly learn how to control their end ranges. But it's just like with anything, I think it's just risky to follow blanket statements without truly knowing who you are and really what you need as an individual. Stretching can be safe and it can be incredibly effective, but it's just realistically not for everyone. And especially in like the youth comp scene, towards like your intermediates, advanced, even like elite, especially elites, the Darwinian thing kind of happens. Like the most flexible people kind of be there. And just because your team's like, oh, we're climbers, we need to stretch. Probably not. Like they're there and they're that good because of these things. And especially you see that on the championship series and stuff. Like all these people are doing crazy, crazy range of motion moves, which is why they're probably at the elite level. And even those people are going to complain about being tight. But do they have range of motion limitation? Probably not. So their solution is going to be a little different. So that's kind of my little 30-second elevator speech on just be careful about blanket statements in general.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and we have that in our household. My husband is like hypermobile and he should not be stretching very much. And so we've seen that in action because of the number of injuries that he's gotten because of it, and I think a lot of people have that.
It's crazy. I work with a lot of like field sports with goalies, so like field hockey, lacrosse, and all that. And all the goalies, when they're really good, it's because they're pretty flexible. And I have some athletes that have like medical level, like hip dysplasia or some bony change, where they shouldn't be doing the team stretches. They need to be doing the sit down and relax and strength train and make sure your hip's okay and warm it up appropriately. And be careful not to just drop down into violent splits all the time, because then the clicking starts and the pain and then this, and all of a sudden they tear a labrum and they're like, oh man, why? Well, you should have been on a different path as compared to your other teammates.
Hmm.
But sometimes it happens too late, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, the last thing that you have on your outline is the training plan.
Yeah, and so it just kind of comes full circle back to what their week looks like. And so all those things, how do you fit it appropriately into their week? How can you lift and strength train roughly 2 or 3 times per week? How can you climb, again, maybe the adult, beginner, intermediate, things like that, 2, 3, 4 times a week? The elites and the youth elites are going to be in the gym much longer because they can just handle it. And that's kind of how things go at the elite level of anything. It doesn't mean that you, the weekend warrior, need to be climbing 6 days a week just because, someone else can that climbs V15. Um, and oftentimes I think we get sucked into the fact of like, oh, 515 person, V16 person, they climb 7 days a week. That's how you get there. My offer is that no, being that good and being who they are allows them to do that. And so it's this other perspective that you have to just know who you are and then do the thing that pushes you in a positive direction. And as soon as you're getting hurt, it's not that you're doing something wrong. Like, oh, I should be climbing 6 days a week. This person is. No, you just found your limit and you have to stop banging your head off the ceiling and bring yourself back down a little bit. And then the bullet points in the outline basically just say, I think the biggest value I've ever brought people, I think, is just giving people a plan when they walk into the door. So people walk into the climbing gym, they go, ooh, pretty colors. What do I do? And just having some type of plan is way better than no plan. I think Steve Bechtel said this not too long ago, where like a 60% good plan done well or consistently is way better than a perfect plan not done at all. And also way better, paraphrasing now, than like no plan. So you have to have something that is giving you direction, but that's also doable. And that doability is just defined by something that fits you, the individual, safely, but also fits your time. And then when you look at it, you go like, oh, I can do this. And you can do it consistently, week after week, month after month, year after year. Because in years, if you can do that consistently, you're going to see progress no matter what. But it's about being consistent, and that doability is what it is. And qualities of that for a final touch is making sure that things aren't rigid. Like Monday is this, Tuesday is this. You must do this on Friday. No, I love to see things in like little puzzle pieces. So for the people I work with, I will give them fingers in like a little piece, and then strength training in a little piece, and then climbing in a little piece. And I give them the autonomy, like move that around, be your own artist, and allow yourself to get busy that you didn't expect on Tuesday, and allow your kids to throw up on you right before you were planning on leaving the house, and have to switch your fingers over here and switch your strength training over here and switch your climbing over here. And then if you do 80% of that, 80% of the year, you're going to see progress. You should not have the classic all or nothing approach.
Yeah. I think this is a good reminder. Like a lot of the things that you're saying are basically like, let's rein it in, folks. Like
Yeah.
let's use our brains. Let's think about this with longevity in mind. Let's not overdo it. And which I think is really important. What do you think about that?
Yeah. And, from a coaching perspective, there's the thing called like the Dunning-Kruger effect, I think. And basically you start off knowing nothing, you learn a little bit, and you just get psyched to the moon. You're like, we're going to do this. This is the answer. This is how you do it. And then you go 5 or 10 years down the road and you learn there's so much out there we don't know. We really don't know anything. And so you fall down the roller coaster a little bit. You don't go to the bottom, but you land in the middle. And then you realize the value of everything is somewhere in the middle. pendulum swing very far left and then very far right and then very far left, and then very rarely land in the middle. And if you can get to that point quickly, you're going to see more sustainability in your training, in your health, in your quality of life, in your climbing. And it's just a good place to be. And that's kind of where you end up. I like to think of the analogy of that kind of training and mentality and mindset is kind of like in like a romantic comedy. It's like the guy the girl always settles with eventually. You got to go through the bad boys and all this first. And then you kind of find that settling down long-term, something that just makes sense. It made sense the whole time. But I think as humans, like I never listened to my mom when I was growing up. I had to find out the hard way sometimes. And then you realize, man, mom was right. Mom was right the whole time. But as long as you kind of get there quicker than not, or at least eventually, yeah, I think that's where training and climbing and happiness really all come together.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being on the show to talk about all this and give us some really good reminders and to give us some good ideas for what to do with our time in the gym and in the weight room. Is there anything that you want to add?
Oh, I think that's a nice 30,000 foot view of all the things. We coach in more detail on the strength and the finger training and the protocols and the endurance and flexibility and then skill acquisition. We go down rabbit holes all the time. And so I'm more than happy to answer any questions in specific that people may have on the podcast or afterwards. We can go deep dives on more episodes in the future. I've got a lot of episodes to catch up with Tyler. He's got like 47, something high. But I think that's just the general idea is that keeping it simple, keeping it doable. And if you can look back on the last year and be like, I showed up 2 or 3 times per week, most of the weeks, that's a really good thing. Especially if you're doing so healthy, not getting hurt.
Yeah. And where can people find you and how can they work with you?
On Instagram, I am at Lifts McGee. That is LIFTS MCGEE. And I am very responding there more than my text messages. You can ask my people. My little bubble next to my text message is like 235. I just
Oh my gosh.
can't do it. It's too much. And then Camp4 humanperformance.com is where you'll find us on our website, and you can work with me there. I work with people one-on-one for strength training. I help do just one-off consultations. And if you are also a coach, I help coaches better understand all this stuff and how to apply it to their youth teams, to their one-on-one adult clients, to their adult fitness gym. And that's kind of like the biggest thing we've been doing recently now with like the certification and everything. We've are helping coaches better understand this stuff too, because even athletes and coaches alike, it's very confusing. And how do we find that middle ground that we can be really good and effective people, giving people performance, but also safety at the same time.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. Again, it was an honor to finally be on the podcast that I've been listening to for forever. So feels like a little dream.
Oh, thank you. All right. Talk to you soon. All right. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Collin McGee. Again, you can find him at Camp for Human Performance. You can find him on Instagram at Lifts McGee. And you can work with him if you want. He is a very clear speaker. He understands this stuff really well, and I really enjoyed talking to him. It was a nice overview. I mean, we've covered a lot of this stuff on the podcast in the past, but I thought it was a really great time to just revisit the basics and talk about how to fit them into your busy schedule. So again, I'm taking 5 more mindset clients to work with you on your climbing performance and enjoyment of the sport. If you feel like you need some personalized help with that, you can go to trainingbeta.com/mindset. I just reduced my prices, created a new 4-pack of sessions with me, or you can just do session by session. And if you aren't sure if you want to work with me, you can do a 15-minute free session to see if we're a good fit and to answer any questions that you've got for me. So again, you can find that at trainingbeta.com/mindset. And I really hope to work with you on enjoying your sport a little bit more. Thanks for listening all the way to the end. You can find us at trainingbeta.com and on Instagram at trainingbeta, and I will talk to you next time.